Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I just did an Aztec video and I had terrible rum and coke, and I think I fixed it. Not completely. It's really good. See, when you start off and you put that much rum in there, I know it's not going to work out, but I do it anyways. And then I put ice in there, and then I put like that much coke in there, and I'm just like, oh, this is terrible. Yeah, of course it is. You're stupid. So this is Special Forces of Alexander the Great. Before I get into the video, I just want to say something. It's not important. I am looking at getting solar panels installed on the roof of my house. I would get about 50% savings. It's going to be $50-some thousand in tax credits, and I'm going to need 62 panels. I'm going to get 105% power during the day, typically in like summer, and then at night I'll draw from the power company. I could get a battery, but that only works if the power goes out. And I will produce more, or I will use an X amount, and I'll produce more than that, and that'll be sold to the electric company, and I'll get a credit. And then in the winter, when the sun goes down, I'll be drawing more from the electric company, and I'll be burning off that credit. I may owe the electric company $50 to $100 at the end of the year. I may have a credit for $35 to $100 at the end of the year. It just depends. It's a 25-year payment plan, and it's going to cost $75,000 if I go into it. So 30-year solar panels. Panels are 30 years to be able to maximize the length, because they degrade over years. And I could probably use them for 35, 40 years, but the production of them would drop. I may only be getting 80%, and then I would be drawing from the electric company, which, you know, if you're in Illinois, Ameren, we had a $240 electric bill, and Ameren charged us $150 to deliver that power. It's ridiculous. We make the power in the state, and they just charge ridiculous fees. So, sorry for that little tirade. Just thought I would tell people I'm going to be signing a document, have them come to the house and look at everything, and go from there. They got to look at the roof and stuff like that. I think I might need a new roof, though. I think mine is probably about 15 years. So I think I'm going to need a new roof. And then they want to chop some trees, but I don't think that's going to happen. But none of that, man, I just thought I would tell you because, you know, hey, I share things. So let's just go ahead and get into the video.
Formidable companions and the devastating Macedonian phalanx epitomized the conquests of Alexander.
Come on.
Yet there were many other units in Alexander's army besides his mighty Macedonians, many of which specialized in performing roles critical to some of Alexander's greatest military triumphs. In this episode, we will have an in-depth look at these units. The Macedonian army was lacking in terms of light infantry, having very few archers and skirmishers. Instead, Alexander's greatest light infantry came from outside his home region. One such unit were the Agrianians. Hailing from the upper Strymon Valley, the Agrianians were a Paeonian tribe with a prestigious history.
By the way, real fast, I have not given a thumbs up or said anything yet, but Panda, I got your notice about video about some badass soldiers for Alexander. I don't know if this covers them, but I will definitely look into that video.
The Thracians, Illyrians and Paeonians were all famed for their versatility and skill as light infantry, but the Agrianians stood out above the rest. This was in no small part due to their homeland's terrain. Its rugged, mountainous landscape ensured these hardened warriors were well suited to traversing and fighting on even the most unforgiving terrain, where speed and mobility triumphed above all else.
Come on, internet.
Philip recognized their skill and had incorporated units of Agrianians into his reformed army to serve as versatile light infantry, a complement to the heavier Macedonian footmen. Alexander would continue promoting Macedonian friendship with the Agrianians, even marrying his half-sister, Kinene, to the Agrianian king Langirus. In return, he received the best light infantry the Agrianians could offer to swell the ranks of his forces, and an elite Agrianian contingent would accompany Alexander to Asia. Each Agrianian was equipped in a similar style to the peltast. Their panoply consisted of a Phrygian helmet and very light body armour, while javelins, called loncae, were their primary weapon. Alongside javelins, each Agrianian warrior also carried a pelter shield, as well as either a sword or spear for close combat. As with all light infantry, mobility was the key to the Agrianians' deadliness. In battles, Alexander would place them on the right side of the infantry line to cover his prestigious right flank. Furthermore, on any lightning marches undertaken by Alexander through harsh terrain, the Agrianians were included. Not only was their expertise at both traversing and fighting in mountainous areas unmatched throughout the entirety of Alexander's army, but their light armour meant they were ideal troops to accompany Alexander across desert terrain. Consequently, they were regularly assigned for special missions where mobility was key. It was the Agrianians, for instance, that Alexander tasked with defeating a numerically superior Persian force situated on foothills to the right of Alexander's force during the Battle of Issus. Although vastly outnumbered, the Agrianians easily overwhelmed their Persian counterparts as they excelled at fighting in this terrain. The Agrianians were a critical part of his army throughout his campaign, and he reinforced them with units from their homeland whenever possible. Alongside the Agrianians, Alexander also had archers, organized into companies of 500 men. He had 2 battalions of bowmen in his army at the beginning of his campaign. Although some Macedonians appear to have served as archers, the most notable contingent was that comprised of Cretans. Situated in the southern Aegean, the island of Crete was famous for its archers. Rough terrain dominated the island's landscape, rendering phalanx warfare useless. Rather than embrace the hoplite tradition of mainland Greece, the Cretans prioritized the bow as their weapon of choice on the battlefield. Their self-bows were likely made from either yew or cedar wood, the best available on the island. Each Cretan was also equipped with both a sword and a small bronze pelter shield to give them more protection if it came to hand-to-hand fighting. As the mainland Greeks regarded archery with disdain, the Cretans soon became some of the most feared archers in the Hellenic world. For many years before the rise of Macedon, Greek armies had recruited these bowmen as mercenaries to complement their armies. Alexander was no different, and his Cretans soon became the elite company in his archer regiment. In battle, Alexander would usually deploy most of his archers to fight alongside the elite Agrianians on his right flank. Together they acted as agile skirmishers who would cover that side of the Macedonian line. Yet on occasion, Alexander positioned his Cretans away from the rest of his archers on the left flank, where they were tasked with doing an identical job. Like the Agrianians, Alexander's archer corps were highly mobile and followed Alexander on various special missions through harsh terrain. At the Persian gates in the Zagros Mountains, for instance, the archers accompanied Alexander's elite force up a narrow mountain pass that bypassed the Persian defense. descending on the Persian camp from behind, they slaughtered the unsuspecting Persians. Later, Alexander would upgrade his archer corps. Just as with the Cretans in Europe, the Persians were renowned for their archery in Asia, and their composite bows outdistanced the Cretan self-bows.
So basically he defeated the Persians and then took them in. Hey, you can fight for me and you won't die. Okay.
Recognizing this, Alexander incorporated many Persian archers into his army as he progressed eastwards. By 326 BC, he had expanded the archer corps so significantly that they were now divided into multiple regiments of 1,000 men, or chiliarchies.
Wow.
Alexander evidently saw his archer contingents as one of the most crucial parts of his light infantry. Yet for the Cretans, it appears Alexander did not always use them solely as archers, as evidence survives that certain Cretans also served as long-distance runners, or hemerodromoi. Messengers were a critical part of Alexander's communication system while on campaign, and long-distance runners had long been used for this purpose in both Greek and Persian armies. Most famously, the Athenian Phidippides following the Battle of Marathon. Thanks to Crete's uneven terrain, long-distance training races occurred regularly during any Cretan's military education. Many were thus adept endurance runners.
Interesting.
Wouldn't it be better if a leather holster could lock? With limited carry options, responsible gun owners know the frustrations that come with carrying a gun.
Totally.
Unlike leather that's flexible.
Keep my shotgun on me all the time and it's so tough.
Although Alexander's companion cavalry have come to epitomize his conquests, they were not the only elite shock cavalry force in his army. Among Alexander's body of horsemen was another equally prestigious unit, the Thessalian Cavalry. Similar to Macedonia, the region of Thessaly had a unique equine history. Its topography consisted of extensive plains, ideal for grazing horses. Consequently, the horses bred in Thessaly became famed in antiquity for both their speed and endurance, and were considered the best in Greece. It is no surprise that the famed steed of Alexander, Bucephalus, was from Thessaly. Embracing their region's suitability for rearing quality horses, the Thessalian cavalry quickly gained a reputation as the best in Greece until the time of Philip's reforms. Upon gaining military control of Thessaly in circa 344 BC, Philip thus incorporated units of Thessalian cavalry.
I'm sorry, this has nothing to do with this video, but what happened to Philip's eye? Did he lose it in a battle? Unrelated to this video, but you know, they keep showing the picture of him, and I've wanted to ask and I keep forgetting.
Into his reformed Macedonian army. 10 years later, Alexander brought 1,800 of them into Asia with his invasion force, with 200 further Thessalians arriving as reinforcements soon after. In total, the largest allied cavalry force in his army, almost equaling the size of his elite Macedonian companions. Although similar in many respects, Alexander's Thessalian squadrons would be distinguished from the companions by their iconic purple cloak.
So was Alexander the Great's best attribute, was it the speed? I saw the video. It was a while ago and I just don't remember. I see so many videos and a lot of times information is in and out. And I drink, so, you know, I forget things. But was it speed? You know, I mean, I'm going to call them archers. I apologize. You know, they're kind of like little snipers, being able to fire at a distance. And you got the cavalry. I know that's not what it's called, but, you know. So, was he big on speed as opposed to hunkering down and just battling it out? Or have I completely forgotten?
This robe was designed so that two corners of the robe hung down both in front and behind the wearer, and was iconic to the Thessalian nobility. When his horse galloped, a horseman wearing this cloak would be flanked by what looked like purple wings as the cloak waved up loosely behind him, thus giving the cloak the nickname Thessalian Wings. Aside from their iconic cloak, the arms and armour of Alexander's Thessalians were very similar to the elite companions. Their panoply consisted of a linen cuirass and teruges, as well as a Boeotian helmet and metal greaves. They carried a curved, slashing sword called a kopis, although this was their secondary weapon. Traditionally, the Thessalian cavalry had been primarily equipped with 2 short spears. One would be thrown as a javelin, while the cavalryman would then use the other as either a second javelin or short spear, depending on the situation. Yet by the time the Thessalian cavalry contingents had been incorporated into first Philip's and then Alexander's Macedonian army, it appears this weaponry had changed. By 334 BC, their main armament was a lance called a ziston, similar to that carried by the companions, as it was the perfect weapon for the Thessalians' famous formation, the rhomboid. First developed by the tyrant Jason of Pherae just prior to the rise of Macedon, the rhomboid formation was flexible, as its shape allowed the formation to change direction without losing its cohesiveness. To lead the others in the maneuvers, expert cavalrymen were placed on the sides of this formation, while the very best positioned themselves at the angle points to lead the others when changing direction. The squadron leader, the Iliarch, would be placed at the top point, while a squadron closer, an Oragos, would place himself at the rear point. Those positioned on the right and left points were called flank guards, or plagiophylakes. When fighting in this formation, contemporaries described them as unstoppable. Its flexibility especially was useful for when the Thessalians were tasked with holding ground against an enemy cavalry attack, something Alexander was sure to appreciate and take advantage of. Alexander structured his Thessalian cavalry very similarly to his companions. They were formed into elay squadrons of 200 men, each based on the various districts of Thessaly. Each squadron was commanded by an Iliarch. Like the royal squadron of the companions, one of the Thessalian squadrons, the Pharsalian squadron, was more powerful than the rest. It consisted of 300 men and the best of the Thessalian cavalry. At the Battle of Gaugamela, for instance, the Pharsalian squadron acted as Parmenian's personal bodyguard on the left wing. Such was their quality. Keen to ensure his control over the Thessalians, Alexander appointed a Macedonian officer called Philippus as the overriding commander or hipparch of the squadrons. In each of his 3 major battles against the Persians, the Thessalians would play a critical role. Alexander would place them on the left flank of his army, the counterparts to himself and his companions on the right. There, the Thessalians would hold off superior Persian forces long enough for Alexander to deal the critical blow with his phalanx and companions. It was the Thessalians who were tasked with fending off the Persian army's formidable cavalry contingents during the Battle of Issus. Thanks to both their quality and their use of the rhomboid formation, the outnumbered Thessalians held off the Persian cavalry long enough for Alexander to rout the rest of the force, thus saving the day. Alexander would recognize the critical role his Thessalians had played in his victory, and he thus gave them the lion's share of the spoils in Darius's abandoned baggage train. The Thessalians would not remain with Alexander for all his campaigning. By 330 BC, Alexander had captured the key Persian administrative capitals, Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, and Ecbatana, and he duly disbanded all his allied Greek contingents, including the Thessalians. A few did stay on as mercenaries, yet within a year, Alexander had them disbanded too.
Why?
Following the departure of his Thessalians from his expedition, Alexander added another specialized cavalry force, the Hippotoxite, or Horse Archers. Recruited mostly from the nomad Dahe in Central Asia, who were specialists at horse archery, this 1,000-strong contingent of horse archers was devastatingly effective. Lightly armoured and swiftly moving, they acted as a mobile screen in front of Alexander's army, peppering their foe with volleys of arrows and keeping them preoccupied while Alexander advanced his phalanx forwards.
Did he just not want to use anyone for too long? Is that why he would send them back, or disband them? Just curious.
It is also likely that this unit replaced the Macedonian light cavalry as the main scouting force in Alexander's army. Although Alexander's Macedonians formed the nucleus of his army for the entirety of his campaigns, they were not the only units Alexander relied heavily upon during his conquests. The Agrianians, Cretans, Thessalians, Persians, and Dahae all served similarly critical roles for the Macedonian king at various times throughout his campaigns. Our series on the evolution of the armies will continue.
That was very cool. Man, he used a lot of different he had a lot of different forces. It's not the right word. I don't know what I'm trying to think, how I'm trying to phrase it. That one, though, that kind of came down, I forgot, was it Iliac was leading it? And how it showed the picture of them charging through, just kind of piercing the line. Man, that would, if you had a bunch of those, oh, that'd be, because they come, you're looking forward, right, and they come piercing through, and you might get out of the way, and then you start fighting. But the group that just blew past you, they're turning around now and they're attacking you from behind. It's pretty creative. Well, I'm going to end this here. So, like and subscribe, or just have a good day, have a good night.